There is a passage in Marcus Aurelius that sounds like it was written by Neville Goddard 2,000 years too early. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And here is Neville, in a 1963 lecture, saying it the other way around. The world is yourself pushed out. Change your conception of yourself, and you change your world. One was an emperor, the other a mystic. One spoke of inner governance, the other of assumption. But both men were teaching the same truth. The outside does not rule you. You are not at the mercy of circumstance. The shift happens within first, and when it does, the outer world has no choice but to follow. But there is something more here, something quieter, something neither man shouted but both lived. It is this: once you have assumed the state, once you have made the inner shift, you must let go, not abandon it, not doubt it, but release your grip on the how and the when. You must, in Neville's words, live in the end, and in the language of the Stoics, practice apatheia, non-attachment to outcome. Let go and receive. That is what this episode is about. Welcome back to Neville Goddard Universe, the channel where we explore Neville's teachings not as a single isolated thread, but as part of a vast tapestry woven across traditions, centuries, and systems of thought. I'm here because I believe Neville was not teaching something new. He was recovering something eternal. And when we place his words beside the language of Stoicism, of the Kybalion, of the mystics and the quantum theorists, we see the same truth reflected back at us in different mirrors. Today, we are diving into a question that almost everyone who practices Neville's method eventually asks: how do I let go without giving up? How do I stay in the wish fulfilled without obsessing over the outcome? Neville called it living in the end. The Stoics called it apatheia. Not apathy as we understand it today, but non-attachment. The mystics called it surrender. In 5D language, it is the frequency of completion. And all of them are describing the same state of consciousness. We are going to take Marcus Aurelius and Neville, place them side by side, and show you how their teachings converge into a single practice, one that is practical, powerful, and completely grounded in Neville's core method from his 1950s lectures. By the end of this episode, you will understand not just why detachment is essential, but exactly how to practice it in your daily life. And if this exploration speaks to you, if you find something here that shifts your understanding even slightly, I'd be grateful if you'd consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. It is a small gesture, but it helps this work reach others who are ready to see these connections, and I genuinely appreciate every person who walks this path with us. Now, let us begin. Neville did not leave detachment as a vague spiritual platitude. He gave it structure. He gave it a precise location in the imaginative act, and he told us exactly when to do it. Let me take you to one of his core lectures from the 1950s, a period when his language was most crystalline and his method most explicit. In these talks, he would walk his students through the imaginative act step by step, and then he would say something that always stopped people in their tracks. When you have felt the wish fulfilled, when you have lived the scene with all the vividness of reality, then, and only then, do you drop it. You do not carry it with you like a burden. You do not revisit it obsessively. You let it go because it is done. It is done. That phrase is everything. It is not hopeful. It is not future tense. It is a declaration of completion in the present moment. Neville did not say, "It will be done." He said it is done. And the moment you assume that, the moment you feel it as already complete, the work of consciousness is finished. What remains is simply the unfolding in time, which is inevitable, mechanical, and not your concern. This is where most people stumble. They do the imaginative act beautifully. They enter the state. They feel the reality of the wish fulfilled. And then, the moment they open their eyes, they start scanning the outer world for evidence. They start asking, where is it? Why hasn't it shown up yet? Did I do it right? And in that question, they have left the end. They have returned to the state of wanting, of waiting, of lack. They have re-entered 3D consciousness, where time is linear and results are external. And Neville would say, you cannot serve two masters. You cannot live in the wish fulfilled and simultaneously live in the state of its absence. So what is the solution? Detachment. But not the detachment of indifference, not the detachment of giving up, the detachment of knowing. Let me illustrate this with a story Neville himself told. A woman came to him desperate to marry a specific man. She had been doing her imaginal acts for weeks, but nothing was happening. She was frantic, obsessive, checking her phone, waiting for his call, analyzing every interaction for signs. Neville stopped her and said, "You are not living in the end. You are living in the pursuit. If you were already his wife, would you be acting this way?" She saw it immediately. A woman who is already married does not obsess over whether her husband will propose. She does not wait anxiously by the phone. She simply is his wife. She lives from that assumption. And that is the state Neville told her to enter, not as a future hope, but as a present fact. Assume you are already that which you want to be, he said, and walk as though it were true, not because you are pretending, but because in consciousness it is true, and consciousness is the only reality. So she shifted. She stopped the frantic checking. She stopped rehearsing conversations in her mind. She did her imaginal act once more, this time feeling it fully, feeling the ring on her finger, hearing him call her his wife, and then she let it go. She went about her life from the state of the wish fulfilled. She did not deny her desire. She did not pretend she did not care. She simply lived as though it were already done. 3 weeks later he proposed. Now, you might say that is coincidence. You might say the timing was already in motion. And Neville would agree with you, but not in the way you think. He would say, yes, it was already in motion, because the moment she truly assumed the state, the bridge of incidents began to build itself. The outer world is always reflecting the inner state. When she was in the state of lack, the world mirrored lack. When she entered the state of fulfillment, the world had no choice but to conform. But here's the key. She could only enter that state when she let go of the outcome. This is the paradox. To manifest, you must care deeply enough to assume the state, and then care so little about the outer confirmation that you release it entirely. You must want it enough to imagine it, and then live as though you already have it, which means you are no longer wanting it. Neville called this living in the end. And it is not passive, it is not waiting. It is the most active state of consciousness there is, because you are holding the assumption steady, regardless of what the senses report. You are governing your inner world so completely that the outer world must follow. But how do you do that? How do you hold the assumption without gripping it? How do you live in the end without obsessing over the evidence? This is where the Stoics come in. The Stoics did not speak of imagination the way Neville did. They did not teach the law of assumption in those terms. But they understood something essential about the structure of human experience. The only thing you truly control is your inner state. Everything else, health, wealth, reputation, the actions of others, belongs to the realm of externals. And externals, the Stoics said, are indifferent, not unimportant, not meaningless, but indifferent in the technical sense. They do not determine your well-being, your peace, your power, your freedom. These arise from within, from the governance of your own mind. And when you realize this, you become unshakable. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. He was not saying the outer world does not matter. He was saying it does not have power over you. It cannot make you miserable unless you consent to misery. It cannot disturb your peace unless you hand over that peace voluntarily. The shift is always internal first. Sound familiar? Neville said it this way: circumstances do not matter. Only the state of consciousness from which you view them matters. These are two men, separated by 2,000 years, saying the exact same thing. But the Stoics went further. They developed a concept called apatheia, which is often mistranslated as apathy. It is not. Apatheia means non-attachment to outcome. It means you act from virtue, from inner alignment, from what the Stoics called logos, the rational ordering principle of the universe, and then you release the results. You do your part, and you trust the larger intelligence of the cosmos to do the rest. Epictetus, another great Stoic teacher, put it beautifully: make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. Now listen to Neville again from a 1954 lecture. Do the imaginal act, feel it real, then drop it, knowing it is done. The how and the when are not your concern. Your job is to assume the state. The state will externalize itself. Do you see it? Both are teaching the same structure. Inner work first, then release. Assume the state, then let go. Not because you do not care, but because you have already done the work in consciousness, and consciousness is causative. The outer is effect, not cause. In modern language, we might say Neville's living in the end is the 5D frequency of completion. You are not waiting for the thing to happen in 3D. You are already vibrating at the frequency of its completion. You are already being the person who has it. And from that state, detachment is natural. You do not cling to what you already possess. The Stoics understood this in their own terms. They said, align yourself with the logos, with the divine order, and trust that order. Do not try to control the river. Become the river, Neville said. Consciousness is the only reality. Assume the state, and reality must conform. Different words, same truth. Now let me take this even deeper. The Stoics taught that most human suffering comes from attachment to outcomes we cannot control. We want the promotion, the relationship, the recognition, and we make our peace conditional on getting it. So when the outer world does not deliver, we suffer. We feel powerless. We feel like victims. But the Stoic says, you are not a victim. You are the ruler of your inner citadel. No one can take that from you. And when you govern your mind with discipline, with clarity, with virtue, the outer world loses its power to disturb you. Neville says the same thing, but with even more force. The outer world is not separate from you. It is not acting upon you. It is you. It is consciousness pushed out. So if you are disturbed by the outer, it is only because you have not yet claimed your power within. Change the inner, and the outer must follow. But both agree on this. Once you have done the inner work, once you have assumed the state, once you have aligned with the principle, you must let go. You must practice what the Stoics called apatheia, and what Neville called living in the end. You must stop trying to manipulate the outer. You must stop checking for evidence. You must stop living in the energy of pursuit, because pursuit implies lack, and lack cannot create abundance. Here is the moment of convergence, the point where these two teachings become one. Neville's instruction, it is done, is structurally identical to the Stoic practice of apatheia. Both are saying, do your part in consciousness, then release the outcome. Trust the principle. Trust the law. Trust that if you have truly assumed the state will harden into fact. You do not need to worry about the how. You do not need to force the when. You need only to remain faithful to the assumption, to live from the end rather than toward it. And when you do that, when you truly let go and live in the end, you are not passive, you are not resigned. You are standing in the most powerful state of consciousness there is, the state of completion. Let go and receive. That is the teaching. Now, let us make it practical. I am going to walk you through the exact method Neville taught in his 1950s lectures, step by step, so you can apply this tonight. This is not theory. This is the technique. It has 3 movements: the imaginative act, the declaration of completion, and the practice of living in the end. All three are essential. Miss one, and the circuit is incomplete. First movement. The imaginative act. You begin by selecting a scene, a single, simple scene that implies the wish is fulfilled. Not the wish itself, but the evidence of it. Neville always said, "Do not imagine the thing you want. Imagine what you would experience if you already had it." If you want financial freedom, do not imagine money. Imagine the relief, the ease, the conversation with a friend, where you casually mention you no longer worry about bills. If you want a relationship, do not imagine the person's face. Imagine the feeling of their hand in yours, the sound of their voice calling you by a name that implies intimacy. The scene must be short. Neville recommended 3 to 4 seconds of sensory vividness, not a long cinematic sequence, a single moment, looped and felt. Now, you enter the state akin to sleep. This is crucial. You do not do this while fully awake and alert. You do it in the drowsy state just before sleep, when the conscious mind is quiet and the subconscious is receptive. Neville called this state akin to sleep, SATS. It is the state where imagination has the most power, because the reasoning mind is no longer interfering. You lie down, you close your eyes, you breathe slowly and let your body relax. You feel yourself sinking, sinking, sinking. And when you are on the edge of sleep, you call up the scene. You do not visualize it from the outside. You are seeing it. You are seeing it from your own eyes. You are feeling it in your body. You are hearing it with your own ears. You make it sensory. You make it vivid. You make it real. And then, this is essential. You loop it. You repeat it, not mechanically but with feeling. You let the reality of it saturate you. You stay in it until it feels more real than the room you are lying in. Neville said it should feel natural, not forced, not strained. Natural, as though it is simply a memory of something that already happened. When you reach that point, when the scene feels real, when the feeling of the wish fulfilled floods your chest, when you know it is done, you let it go. You do not hold on to it. You do not replay it obsessively. You simply release it into the depths of consciousness and fall asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. That is the first movement. Second movement, the declaration of completion. When you wake the next morning, you do not ask, "Did it work?" You do not go searching for evidence. You do not re-enter the state of lack. Instead, you remind yourself, "It is done," not, "It will be done." Not, "I hope it works." It is done. In consciousness, where all things are created, the work is complete. The outer is simply catching up. Neville often used the metaphor of planting a seed. When you plant a seed, you do not dig it up every day to check if it is growing. You trust the soil. You trust the process. You trust the law. This is the same. You have planted the seed in consciousness. Now you must trust the law of assumption to bring it forth. So you declare, quietly, inwardly, with calm certainty, "It is done. I am already the person I imagined myself to be." The outer world is now conforming to this inner fact. And then you go about your day. Third movement, living in the end. This is where the Stoic practice of apatheia becomes practical. You do not obsess over the outcome. You do not chase signs. You do not rehearse backup plans in case it does not happen. You live from the state, not toward it. What does that mean in practice? It means you notice your inner conversations. When you catch yourself thinking from the old state, from lack, from doubt, from frustration, you gently correct it. You do not berate yourself. You simply pivot back to the assumption. If you find yourself thinking, "I hope this works," you stop and reframe, "It is already done." If you find yourself anxious about timing, you remind yourself, "The how and the when are not my concern. I have assumed the state." The state will externalize. If you find yourself checking your phone, checking your bank account, checking for evidence, you pause, you breathe, and you ask yourself, "Am I living in the end, or am I living in the pursuit?" because the pursuit is the energy of lack. And you cannot manifest from lack. Living in the end means you act as the person who already has the thing, not in an artificial way, not in a way that denies present circumstances, but in your inner world, in your self-concept, in the feeling with which you move through the day. Neville said, "Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and continue in that assumption until it hardens into fact." The Stoics said, "Govern your inner citadel. Let externals be as they are. Your power is within." Both are teaching the same discipline: detachment from the outer, mastery of the inner, and trust in the principle. So you practice this every day, not as effort, but as remembrance. You remember who you are in consciousness. You remember that the outer is effect, not cause. And you let the world rearrange itself to match the state you are holding. That is the complete method. Do the imaginative act. Declare it is done. Live in the end. Let go and receive. Step back with me for a moment and ask, why does this keep happening? Why do traditions separated by 2,000 years, by continents, by language and culture, keep arriving at the same truth? Neville, a mystic in 20th century America, teaching the law of assumption. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor in ancient Rome, teaching inner governance and apatheia. The Vedantists teaching nishkama karma, action without attachment to the fruits of action. The Christian mystics teaching, let go and let God. The Hermetic axiom, as within, so without. These are not coincidences. These are not cultural borrowings. These are independent discoveries of the same principle, because the principle is woven into the structure of consciousness itself. Consciousness is causative. The inner precedes the outer. Assumption hardens into fact. And once the inner work is complete, attachment to the outer becomes not only unnecessary, but counterproductive. Detachment is not indifference. It is confidence. It is the natural state of someone who knows the work is already done. When you truly assume the state, when you live in the end with the vividness Neville described, you do not need to cling, you do not need to force. You simply RS. And the world, which is yourself pushed out, has no choice but to reflect that back to you. This is what Neville meant when he said consciousness is the only reality. Not that the outer world does not exist, but that it is always secondary. It is always effect. The cause is within. And when you take responsibility for the cause, when you govern your inner world with the precision of a Stoic and the imagination of a mystic, the outer world becomes effortless. The Stoics knew this. They may not have spoken of imagination in Neville's terms, but they understood that the only true power is the power over one's own mind. And that power, exercised with discipline and clarity, makes you free. Neville knew this. He said it plainly. Free will is simply your ability to choose the state you occupy. Once you choose, the state unfolds. You are not free to choose the consequences, but you are always free to choose the state. And so the convergence of these teachings is not a historical curiosity. It is a revelation. It tells us something profound about the nature of reality, that the universe is structured in such a way that those who go within, who learn to govern their consciousness, who align themselves with the principle, they discover the same truth every time. Not because they copied one another, but because the truth is there, waiting to be found, written into the fabric of consciousness itself. And you are discovering it now. You came to this episode asking how to let go without giving up, how to detach without becoming cold, how to live in the wish fulfilled without obsessing over the outer. Now you know. Detachment is not the absence of desire. It is the presence of fulfillment. It is the natural state of someone who has already claimed the thing in consciousness and trusts the law to deliver it in form. Neville gave you the method. Assume the state, feel it real, declare it is done, and live in the end. The Stoics gave you the inner discipline. Govern your mind, release attachment to externals, trust the order of the cosmos. And together, These teachings converge into a single, powerful practice. Let go and receive. If this exploration has deepened your understanding, if it has given you something solid to carry forward, I would be honored if you would leave a like or subscribe to the channel. It is a simple gesture, but it helps this work reach others who are ready to see these connections, and I am grateful for every mind that walks this path with us. Tonight, before you sleep, try it. Enter the state akin to sleep. Construct a single scene that implies your wish fulfilled. Feel it. Live it. Let it saturate you until it feels more real than the room around you. And then let it go. Release it into the depths of consciousness with the quiet certainty that it is done. Do not check for it tomorrow. Do not analyze it. Simply live from the end, as though the thing you imagined is already woven into the fabric of your life. Because in consciousness, it is. The Stoics would tell you, you have done your part. The rest belongs to the cosmos. Neville would tell you, you have assumed the state. The state will externalize itself. Both are saying the same thing. Trust the principle. Trust the law. Trust that what is done in consciousness must, by necessity, harden into fact. And if doubt arises, if the outer world seems slow to respond, if your senses report something other than the wish fulfilled, do not waver. Remember what Marcus Aurelius wrote in the stillness of his own mind. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Your faithfulness to the assumption, even in the face of contradiction, is what builds the bridge. Your refusal to return to the old state is what allows the new state to take root. This is not belief in the sense of blind hope. This is knowledge. This is the direct experience of consciousness as causative. And the more you practice it, the more you will see it confirmed. Not because the universe is rewarding you, but because you are finally living in alignment with the way consciousness works. You are not waiting for permission. You are not waiting for conditions to shift. You are the shift. You are the cause. And the world, as it always has, is yourself pushed out,